Let's focus now on the next steps in Trump's legal battle. Ronald Chapman is a federal defense attorney. Ronald, thank you for joining us this Saturday. My friend, we've been talking about this for weeks. We're here at the end of the trial. We have a verdict. Were you surprised with the outcome?
Absolutely surprised. I think a lot of people were predicting a hung jury. You know, I look at the facts and not necessarily the composition of the jury, and I felt that the facts weren't necessarily there. But here we are. We have a surprising verdict, and we have a roadmap for Trump in terms of appeal that is going to be quite convoluted and difficult to get through. The first thing that he's going to have to do is get through that sentencing phase. But before that, there's going to be the opportunity to file a motion for new trial, which I believe is going to be due June 13th. Not too much time, but I expect that to be the first strike in terms of trying to appeal this verdict.
Looking back at the last few weeks, do you think Trump should have testified?
No, absolutely not. I don't think that the jury needed to hear from him. I don't think it would have changed anything. And then the one vital question that I always have to ask myself and my clients before making that decision is there anything new that Donald Trump would have to offer the jury in terms of the specific facts at issues? Yes, he was at the meeting, the vital meeting that the jury seemed to focus on. But the reality was the jury wasn't really going to trust what he had to say there. I really think that this case should have been made with additional witnesses from the defense side that did not include Donald Trump so that they could more round out the picture, the facts, instead of just arguing against what the government had offered.
The former president immediately vowed to appeal this verdict. You're an attorney. What ground does his team have to stand on legally for this appeal if it moves forward?
Well, I think, you know, if you listen to him in the recent press conference, he said we're going to appeal on many things. And I really think that there's several important issues that need to be articulated in this appeal. First and foremost, we have a very novel, and everybody's been talking about it, but a very novel application of the law here. But I want to go one step further. If you recall, during jury instructions, the judge said that the jury didn't need to unanimously determine which of the three potential ways of committing the crime Donald Trump committed the crime, which means you would think that the jury didn't have to come back with a unanimous verdict. And when you look at some of the Supreme Court case law, specifically on RICO charges or conducting a criminal enterprise charges, which is what they're typically called, you see some case law to suggest that the jury would have to agree on the specific way that somebody conducted a criminal enterprise. This charge is very similar, and I think he has a fantastic argument that the judge didn't require a unanimous verdict because of the way this charge being structured. Everybody's talking about the venue argument, whether he can get a fair trial in New York. I don't think that's going to work because you have to think about case law. If Trump can't get a fair trial in New York, any celebrity is going to cite that case and say, we can't get a fair trial in New York. Weinstein would have said the same thing as well, and other folks going to trial would probably use that same argument. They want to avoid that.
I want to go back to what you said about the jury, because they requested to rehear several parts of David Pecker's testimony in relation to Pecker's phone conversation with Trump while he was in an investor meeting, Pecker's testimony about carrying McDougal as well from Pecker, Michael Cohen regarding the Trump Tower meeting in 2015. What do those portions of the testimony tell you about the jury deliberations and how they were processing the information that they were getting throughout this case?
You know, I can tell sometimes what juries are seeking because I will see the notes and then ultimately see the verdict, and in some cases talk to the jury after. And here's just my assessment from my experience. There were probably a few members of the jury who had a disagreement on what specifically was said during that meeting. Maybe there was a count when they first walked into the room and there were several jurors that were holdouts. They didn't think that Trump was guilty. Then somebody said, hey, let's take a look at the testimony here specifically related to this meeting, which seemed to be the issue. And that testimony appears to confirm or potentially to resolve those jurors' concerns, which caused them to switch their vote to guilty, giving us a unanimous verdict, and then that end of the day verdict that we received.
So, Ronald, how does the outcome of this case impact Trump's other legal cases in the next few months?
Well, we're looking at a state felony conviction or several state felony convictions here that will have isolated implications. But here's the real concerning aspect that hasn't been answered and needs to be resolved. Donald Trump, if he's put on probation, will be under conditions prescribed by the judge, which means the judge will essentially still have control over Donald Trump through probation conditions, so will New York. If Donald Trump is the president-elect, is it possible for a probation office to have control over the president? This is a very interesting question when it comes to thinking about Donald Trump's sentence and principles of federalism. Generally speaking, it is not appropriate for a state to have control over a federal officer. I'm really interested to see if the Supreme Court addresses that in the immunity case. I hope that they do. And as a result, I hope that this can all be put on pause so that we can have an elected leader serve, if that's the case.
We'll be watching very closely. Ronald Chapman, always appreciate your insight and context. Thank you.
Thank you so much.